And we're live. I, I,
Black holes.
I feel like Schrodinger's GIMP.
mm,
Am I alive or am I dead? What's in the box, Schrodinger?
What's in the box?
what's in Zed's basement? This is interesting. So I'm so thrilled right now. We have 3 microphones, 3 channels. It's like, it's almost
Can you hear me?
as if we are recording in an alternate universe, you guys. I have distinct memories, Lou, of you and I starting this podcast in a van using a USB microphone.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, look
That
at
was the
this.
humble beginnings
You should
of
be
my
proud.
old Honda Odyssey
Yeah.
van.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Honda Odyssey. Oh, baby. Okay.
We were in a van parked in the garage for best for audio quality, right?
Engine
that was
off,
our
I'm sure.
engine off, yeah.
For the sound.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because it was like this, our own little sound booth.
Enclosed.
And that was such a fucking bitch in the summer. Oh my god. We would get so hot. We would step out, and even though it's still like 80 degrees, it feels like we walked into air conditioning.
Just wring your shirts out on the...
Kinda.
Yeah.
Wasn't a peach in the winter either, although we did
No.
have a space heater. But you gotta pause so your teeth don't chatter. You gotta
Right.
okay, I gotta get up
Oh.
and stretch. We gotta rub my palms together a little bit here.
Man, you guys were devoted, though.
It's as if at one point around 2018, maybe not 2015, not necessarily 2012, but around 2018, it's as if, I don't know, like some hadron particles were blasted together or something, and all of a sudden we were in a new universe where we had an audio mixer and a soundboard and all of these things. And then at some point, our universe shifted again, and it was just us recording into one Blue Yeti microphone. But I tell you what.
Didn't we start with a Yeti?
We started with something way worse than a Yeti, but
Oh,
this
fair.
is still the original Yeti. We started with a $19. It looked like a mouse pad, and it had the really long
right.
plastic tip. It's like an old school mic because we're
Almost
talking
like
about
a TV antenna.
yeah, it's
I
been
know-
about
I know
10
you people
years.
Don't know what the fuck that is anymore. Just dated myself pretty hard on that one.
I mean, how far do we want to go back on the TV antennas? Are they made of aluminum foil, or are they the kind of antennas you find on the top of old-ass cars?
They weren't made.
Remember
of
the metal
aluminum foil.
antennas on top of
You
cars?
put the
I do.
aluminum foil on it so they conducted better.
Yes, the foil was an
yes,
aid.
but what kind did you have?
We had the one that it looked like one of the bunny ears, but just one,
Mhm.
but it was plastic.
Rabbit
And
ears.
Interesting.
We had the metal rabbit ears that telescoped out and shit.
yes.
That was my first television. It didn't even have a remote. It had an actual switch. Like, you had to walk up to it and, like, switch it on and off.
Yeah, a little knob.
And the channel was a dial, and so was the volume. And when you would change the
wood?
channels, when you change the channels, it would click.
Yep, I remember those TVs too.
Yeah.
I had a
played
cat
my
that was born
Nintendo
behind
that.
one of those. You played your Nintendo? Oh,
The NES.
NES, yeah.
Channel 3, of course.
I never had an NES. I started on a Super.
Mm,
But I also had the Nintendo Brick,
Ooh.
which is a Game Boy
A
for
Game
people
Boy.
that don't know. The original Game Boy, which is like today's, Switch?
kinda?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close.
It's the
Yeah.
Switch of
Because you could
the
have
Switch of the 90s.
the very large magnifying glass, and you could put
I had that.
you could
There was
make your
accessories
Game
for
Boy
that
a
bitch.
Switch. Like, you
Yep,
could boss
I had
that
them.
bad boy
Right.
up.
Yep.
And you had the
They were
little
great.
thing that you could plug in that had the light, so you
Yep.
could play at night and shit.
It didn't work
Yeah.
really well, to be honest with you
No.
guys. So if
No.
anybody was ever like, "Oh man, I always wanted that," no, you didn't.
It
You didn't
wasn't
miss
that
out.
great.
You really didn't.
Although it did work a little bit better on the Game Boy Color.
well,
I'll
the
give it
Game Boy
that, but
Color,
the Game Boy Color
yeah,
kind of had
a bit more
its
brightness.
own contrast.
Yeah.
So
Had a little more going on.
speaking
So,
of contrast,
so maybe we should, maybe we should bounce to a different timeline here.
Yeah, you might have noticed that I referenced a lot of different points in time where things might have changed for us, which is a bit on topic today because we, to put it vaguely or generally, we're discussing alternate realities and then some today. So we're going to cover topics that include the Mandela Effect, the potentiality of us being inside a black hole. What the hell is CERN doing? And are we in the Matrix, among other things. So let's just start where we're going to start, which I believe is the Mandela Effect, right? So just should I define it? Do we
let's just throw it out there, right? I mean, there was a man named Nelson Mandela. Many people have heard of him. He wound up passing away in 2013, and I think when he passed away, that's really when this started, because a lot of people, for some reason, remembered him passing away in the 90s in a prison camp, I believe. They believe he passed away in a prison camp in the 90s.
I thought it was the 80s.
I read it was the 90s, but I could be mistaken.
So I actually can jump in here and help out. So it was the 80s. The creator of the Mandela Effect is a paranormal consultant by the name of Fiona Broome, who actually coined the term in 2009 upon basically expressing her memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s and finding out that there were other people that had that exact same memory very vividly. Hence is why Nelson Mandela gets the name credit for this entire phenomenon, of which we will provide many examples. Many more.
Nothing to develop the theory.
Yeah, he has nothing to do with this other than maybe.
Look into him. He was.
Oh yeah.
He was respectable, to say the very least, about that man. So.
Yeah, you know, he was imprisoned in South Africa.
Yes, he was as well. And he was an anti-apartheid activist, for those of you who don't know, before he became, I believe, the president down there in South Africa. And so I have a question for both of you before we dive any deeper into this, because I personally had the false memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison. I believed that I learned that in middle school social studies. I truly believed that. What memories do you have, Lou? Do you remember it that way?
Remember it. I thought I want to say I learned in elementary school that he died of a heart attack in prison.
Okay.
I don't remember hearing about Nelson Mandela dying.
No?
No. Now, I also was in my own world as a child, so it was very selective what I knew and what I did not know. Not like Mormonism, but almost.
That is well, that is fair. And there's going to be a bit of a trend here going into more of these examples, because we're not all three going to fall on the same side on a lot of these, or on all, which just lends more to the discussion as what we'll talk about later, because in effect, the theory is that some of us are from an alternate reality is one of, I mean, there are multiple potential causes for what could be causing the Mandela Effect, but in some sense or another, like Lou and I remember something that Kelsey doesn't remember ever happening. So in theory, there's a lot of different answers for it, but one of them could be that, well, it happened in the universe that we were in, Lou, at some point, and then now we're in this new one, which is good. You know, it's great. Kelsey's here, so that's good. We're happy to be here.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here, but should we maybe go off some other examples, because the Nelson Mandela thing might not have, you know, it might not have resonated with anybody, right? So what's a good one, Lou? What's the first one that you can think of that maybe the first one that hit you personally, that you were like, what the hell, that's not how I remember it?
Berenstain Bears.
The Berenstain Bears, right? That one, cross it off on my Mandela bingo card.
So
go ahead.
I remember it as Stain with an A. You know.
So you remember it the right way?
I remember it the right way.
Wow.
I have a very specific reason for this. When I was in kindergarten, I said, shouldn't that be Berenstain? Because it's A-I-N. And the librarian looked at me like I was stupid and had a third arm drawn out of my forehead and said, no, that's not the way it's pronounced. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, you know, those are only different letters, but whatever. I didn't say that out loud because, you know, I wasn't trying to catch one across the face. But, no, I didn't go to Catholic school. It was public school. So.
Still, them librarians, though. It doesn't matter.
Those fuckers are a wily bunch. You do not want to get on the wrong side of a librarian. There's a reason they're quiet all that time during the day. It's to think of the evil shit they do at home.
They don't get loud often. They don't need to.
Right.
What about you, Kelsey? What was your first Mandela Effect?
Well, by the way, I remember Berenstein Bears, and I actually remember it that way because I watched the show when I was a kid.
Oh,
and so they would say the Berenstein Bears. I don't remember what that was on, but I watched a ton
on
of
PBS.
so many PBS. Yeah, I watched everything on PBS that was available. So I don't know why. That was just my favorite channel for a long time. So I remember watching the show, and I remember hearing Berenstein Bears. So I actually remember the auditory. I have an auditory memory. But maybe I was hearing it wrong. Maybe it was, I don't know. What is the way it's supposed to be, by the way? Berenstain?
I mean, that's how it's spelled. The pronunciation seems to maybe be what led us here, because Lou also experienced that where the librarian corrected the way he pronounced. I'm about to say pronunciated. Jesus, easy for me to say.
If you want to fancify up them words.
Yeah, just making up words as I go.
Now, my big one, though, was Tinkerbell. I watched so many Disney movies growing up. We had a VHS player. We played the movies all the time, and I would rewind them. For those of you that don't know, a VHS player was actual tapes, and then you couldn't just start the movie over. You had to actually rewind it. It was a button, and it would whirl the tape backwards so you could start it over. It was actually, I don't know. I don't really miss it.
I had there is some nostalgia there.
Rewind.
Exactly. Be kind, rewind. I, to this day, so here I'm gonna plug an old podcast that hopefully someday will return, VHS Mess, where we only reviewed that media. So I still to this day own a rewinder, because that's the best way to save your VCR, baby, is to not force it to rewind all of them tapes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very big investment back in the day. Your rewinder.
Well, I remember Tinkerbell dotting the fucking I on Disney. So I mean, do not tell me, like, it's burned in my brain. She did a certain kind of like dance around the Disney symbol, and then she went up, and then she flicked her wrist, and it went ahead and it dotted the fucking I. So don't tell me that doesn't exist. Well, it existed in my
Disney.
Yes. Yeah. So it existed in the timeline I was in, which actually and how was that for you guys?
I vividly remember that.
Yeah.
Dotting the I?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Disney movies were a big fucking part of my childhood.
Okay.
Huge.
Yeah, same.
Because, my favorites weren't necessarily like everybody else's favorites, but like, my favorite was Fox and the Hound.
Big one.
Sword in the Stone.
Love that one.
Jungle Book.
The Page Master.
Black Cauldron.
Page Master.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'd love
Fern
to
Gullies.
That again. Fern Gully. That wasn't Disney though. That was WB. I think.
That's fair. That was Now I'm just rattling off VHS tapes that I still have, by the way.
So
tons of cartoons.
I think
The Rescuers
Disney.
Down Under.
Fievel.
Fievel was not Disney.
No, it was not. I think that was also.
I'm having my own Mandela moment here.
Called An American Tale.
Hercules.
Fievel Goes West. Yes, An American Tale. Fievel Goes West. Yes, Hercules. So I will just throw this out right now that I still have a box full of Disney VHS tapes. So
I have some too.
Stay tuned for a part 2 where we are probably going to be shocked to insert every single one of these Disney tapes to find out that they have changed what was on our childhood media. But I will say,
see us melt the fuck down.
Yeah, because these are tapes that my mother has held on since childhood. These aren't like I didn't go pick these up at a thrift store. Like these were in my family's possession. They were in my childhood home until my mother moved. Then they were in a box in the attic. They've been in that same fucking box. Mm-hmm. They are now in my possession. They've been in a storage unit. And so if I open that box and find that they're no longer doing the Tinkerbell thing, yes, my brain will literally melt and start coming out of my ears because I won't be able to trust myself with that. But we'll get into some of that with the false memories later.
Those fucking movies babysat me.
Yes.
Yeah, same.
There's a reason.
Children of the 90s were very much raised on TV. I mean, children today are very much raised on tablets and TV and cell phones.
There's a reason we all wanted to be on TV, and kids today all want to be YouTubers.
Exactly.
You want to be mom and dad, don't you? Or whoever else is raising you. But it's not it's a that's just part of life, and I'm not by no means was that a knock towards any parent. By the way,
none in particular.
Yeah.
They did the best they could.
Absolutely.
Which was a hell of a lot better than their parents before mine.
Yeah, and if it weren't for my admittedly addiction to that media form as a child, I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing now. So luckily, as with all things, you have to learn some balance. I can't eat fucking chocolate bars all day either. So I can't just watch TV all day.
Like me.
Yeah, I kind of have to go out in the sun at some point, unfortunately, and that part sucks. I just take my TV with me.
So here's
another.
Exactly, you can take it with you. And we were talking about 90s kids sitting in front of the TV, right? Here's a good example, Mandela Effect. Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
How do you remember it being spelled? We'll start with Lou on this one.
Tunes is in music.
Okay.
Because a lot of the episodes had musical components.
True.
You had orchestra intros and outros and things.
They had that. Yep. Fair. Kelsey?
Double O's. LOONEYTOONS.
You can see it on the thumbnail and on the screen currently. That is the version that I remembered seeing as well. That one is tough. This is one that I just don't trust myself. The Looney Tunes one in particular, because of what, Lou, the way you, instead of spelling it, the way you described it, where you were like, tunes, like the song, because it makes a lot of sense to me that was just what it was called, and maybe this is one, we talked about this one earlier, Skechers. I thought there was a T there because it would make sense for, that's how that word is spelled.
Right.
Yep.
It might have never been that way at all.
I think people might conflate that one. Because the movie with Michael Jordan,
Toon Squad was cartoons. That could absolutely be why. And I think
even canonically within the show, it was Toontown, Town, Toon, Town.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right there, and that, we're teasing a little bit, but that goes into again some of that. We will talk later about a neuroscientist, Caitlin Amote, who's talking about the way neurons fire and the way that memories that either were learned at the same time or are about the same topic tend to live next to each other in the brain. So it's possible. Let me see. Here's one that we debated before the show, Pikachu's tail, because I believe Kelsey and I specifically remembered it being black at the end, right?
Yep, that had a black tip.
I never remembered it being black tipped. Now, the other, pre-evolution of Pichu has a black tip on his tail.
Oh.
And I think Raichu does too.
That's fair. We could be meshing it.
Could be one of those, but and again, it's the photo is on the screen right now. He's hanging out. Old Pikachu's hanging out on Nelson Mandela's shoulder, and when I look at that version, that's the incorrect version, by the way. But it looks so right to me.
Same. I would never question that. I would never look at that and say there was anything wrong with it.
I think if I saw it without the black, I would think it looked weird, which is crazy because apparently that's the correct version.
Yes.
Well, that brings up, we talked about this too. Do you remember Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, who is the fairest of them all? Or do you remember Magic Mirror on the Wall, who is the fairest of them all? From Snow White, the original cartoon made by Disney in the 30s?
Such a long, old school.
1930s. 100 years ago. Dang. Anyway.
I remember it as Magic Mirror, but I don't know, Lou. What did you remember this one as?
I remember it as Mirror, Mirror.
You remember it as Mirror, Mirror? Okay.
But that could be one of those things where the zeitgeist gets it wrong. It's that game of telephone. All it takes is one person to missay it, and you have the next 50 people misremembering it.
See, my thing though is I had a love for that movie as a child. That, like, one of my family members thinks that my favorite movie when I was a kid was The Little Mermaid. It was not. It was actually Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I just loved that movie. Watched it over and over, rewound that VHS tape, and then just played it again. I remember Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. Who's the fair? I remember her voice. Like, I can hear it in my head still. So, like, that brings me to this. We have not been consistent between the three of us on any of this. We have bounced around.
Mm-hmm.
You guys remember that episode of Rick and Morty where they kept splitting because they kept fucking up?
Mm-hmm.
They kept going.
I'm uncertain.
Okay, so I need to talk to Jeff Royland, and I also need to talk to Dan Harmon about this. We would like to bring you on for a talk at some point. I bet you will never do it, and I completely understand that. But it would be fascinating to talk to you about the I'm sure it's not the multi-universe like episode, but yes. Go ahead. You're gonna explode. Go ahead.
We'll give you Costco pumpkin pie.
What if they hit us up and it's not pumpkin pie season, babe?
Then slices of pizza. Have you had Costco's pizza? It's good enough.
Oh, Costco.
This episode is not sponsored, by the way.
Costco, not at all. Not affiliated.
Well, I am a member.
But you know that episode, right?
Yes.
Where things were just, it was so many different.
They were collars.
And
the
then they were all doing
cops
different
came
things.
and beat the shit out of Rick.
Yes.
What if there's a similar situation where with what could have caused the Mandela Effect, or the different things that could have caused the Mandela Effect, everything was going pretty much the same way in these multiverses, which we'll talk about a little later with one of the theories of a child scientist. Fascinating to me, at least. But what if there were so many of them doing it that we all just a bunch at one time, and they all just got mashed together like some crazy freaking,
I don't know, like universes colliding
yeah,
with one another.
Yeah. Because why don't we? Do you guys want to? Or do you guys have anything else, or would you like to?
We can move into some, because I think these examples, we'll have plenty of opportunity to call back to some examples. And for some of the examples that I want to go into, it actually will kind of be best if we save those for when we get to that explanation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good time. And you talked about the blasting into alternate realities, and I think that's a pretty good one to start with, because there are, now that we've talked about the discrepancies in what we remember, let's talk about the why. And I think the first one worth addressing, because it's one of the oldest ones, is that multiversal theory. So the first instance, although some of that's debatable, the first instance that I had where it was noted or was credited was in 1955. Hugh Everett came up with the universe splitting when facing quantum choices, and the idea then essentially being whenever there were these major moments in time that all possibilities did happen. So basically, every time there was something, it wasn't like a yes or a no, it was a yes and a no, and then the universes would split from there. Another key contributor to these multiverse theory is the only Erwin Schrödinger, famous for his cat. Yeah, we'll get into the cat on another day, but yeah,
famous
so
or not famous for the cat.
Infamous
for his treatment of cats. And so that's we'll stop there before we get into what could even cause these multiverses. But yeah, that's what I have for our first potential cause. What do you guys think? I guess about the multiverse theory. Obviously, it's become a lot more prevalent in modern media, which we've discussed at length leading up to this episode.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you listen to Kev and Lucky at all, then you're probably aware that Marvel is brought up quite a bit. And if you haven't noticed, they've brought a lot of this up lately. The multiverse theory is really actually a vital storyline at this point. That's the storyline, it feels like, at this point, other than demonic forces and witches and stuff, which is also very cool. But that's not what we're going to be talking about, though. I think we're all wondering how they could collide. What do you guys think? What's some theories you guys came across?
I heard one that is very fun. It's the idea that the other realities are just on different frequencies, and we all overlap each other.
I think that's a cool, interesting thing.
Yeah,
that's where you get into the paranormal idea of like ghosts are present because they're present in their own time, and sometimes the fluctuation of that energy breaks through to our side, or we break through to their side. You also see the idea from biblically, where people try to go with the whole, everything's happening all at once, because all time is theorized to be in that concept is that it's a straight moving, stream.
That's all we know it to be.
It's a fluid stream, exactly.
Yeah.
And that everything overlaps everything, and everything is one, and all is happening at once. It's the overlapping universe theory, I believe.
And then there, of course, is the side-by-side theory that you hear from Max Laughlin, that child scientist who believes that CERN out of Switzerland, right? Switzerland, Geneva.
Yep.
Right on the border of Swiss and France. The Geneva border. They exist, and they have a large hadron collider. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I've heard it hadron or whatever. Yeah, I've heard it a lot of different ways.
So, what is your guys' understanding? And I wanted to get back to Max Laughlin later, but what's your guys' understanding of what that is?
It's the world's most expensive cock ring.
Essentially, it's also very large.
Yeah, and there's like 12 of them.
So, speaking of Watchmen and that giant blue penis.
Yeah. So
that's how you get ants.
It's that is exactly how you get ants. It's the particle collider where they take these photons, which are essentially the building blocks of all matter, and they ram them into each other.
Yeah, very, very quickly. Particles just bashing against each other at
light
extreme
speed
force.
And beyond.
And it's my understanding that causes it causes the ability to, it gives us the ability to be able to see things that we could not normally see under regular circumstances because you're pushing them together so quickly. It's also my understanding this is 14 kilometers wide. The large hadron collider that CERN has. Yeah,
I think that's about right. I think I might have heard miles in
15 miles around.
I heard kilometers, but
fair.
Which I think is just a little bit different. But sorry, diameter. Yes, not wide, diameter.
No, that might
be a big
be
circle buried under the ground.
Yeah.
So what they're doing there is all kinds of testing. They started that up on September 10th of 2008. That's when they first started this. And Max Laughlin is a had a theory going on when he was 13 years old back in 2017, I believe, is when I saw that he did the little Facebook Live talk that he did. But he's a very intelligent person from what we can tell. And he has a theory that the particle accelerator altered the weight of one electron and therefore destroyed our universe and shifted us into the universe that's directly next to it. And therefore things are different in this universe. Like the Mandela Effect.
Like the Berenstain Bears.
The Berenstain Bear Effect.
The Berenstain
and
Bear
Rod
Effect.
Serling not being Rod Serling.
It's the Berenstain Bear Effect.
Also in this reality, Ed McMahon did not give out the checks for Publishers Clearinghouse. Apparently, he gave them out for a company called American Family Publishers, which I had personally never even heard of before, so I don't know how that could have been possible.
No idea either. I definitely remember it as Publisher fucking Clearinghouse.
Yeah, American Family Publishers went out in 1998, which is the theory as to why none of us remember them. But I could have sworn when he was on Roseanne and when he was on...
I read the goddamn check.
Yeah, I was pretty sure it was Publishers Clearinghouse. But yes, that would explain the Mandela Effect, right? What do you guys think?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a plethora of theories of what happens and what has been happened because of the CERN super collider, from the Higgs boson being found to black holes possibly being developed and made.
Yeah, that the black hole is an interesting one, and it's when you talk about CERN in general, all the way back when it was being designed, and that takes you back to the Clinton era. There were scientists at that time saying that if you make this thing, it's going to create a black hole that's going to engulf our planet. They said that the odds of that happening were 1 in 2.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't gamble at home, those are very good odds.
50-50.
You would take those odds. Yeah.
You could flip a coin and get the same odds.
Yes, that's another good way to put it.
You could also paint different numbers of dots on each side of a rock and flip that and get the same odds. So, I mean, kind of scary when you think about that. Yes.
It is or isn't.
It is almost black and white, if you want to put it in that term. There's no gray area in there at all.
To throw back to the Looney Tunes, is or is it ain't?
So it's only slightly terrifying, right?
Exactly, and that they would know that ahead of time and then run it. It's been like the third iteration of the major Hadron Collider running. That the first one was around 08, 09 to 2012, I think 2013. Then there was the 2016 to 2018 run. And now here's another example of the Mandela Effect. I can't even get sources to agree on what month in 2022 that this thing fired back up. I've heard April, I've heard July. I just know that it is apparently firing off particles again right now and won't stop until 2025. So we could be experiencing yet even more alternate universes as we go on. And you touched on Max Laughlin, and I want to bring this up because one of the things that he talked about after this sort of snapping of our universe was that he talked about it a couple of different ways. One was the idea that we have just kind of slid over to the next available universe, so to speak. But there is also, in a different video, which I think maybe be quoting him from a different conversation, where it said that essentially that, and he does mention this in his Facebook Live, or while you're having conversation, you could be just the mere fact of saying words can sprout out and just stream, I guess, multiple universes from that. So that gave me this sort of idea that, that we're just kind of floating, almost like Pangea. Remember that? Right. Oh, remember that way back in the day when we were all just one giant landmass floating on plates, and things have shifted, and it kind of that whole theory too, that maybe it's not just two universal points that we're talking about here. Right. Maybe there are 15 fucking universes overlapping, like you said, Rick and Morty, and
what he said about the overlap.
Right. One of the theories that space is just a superfluid,
which would explain some of the NASA conspiracies and controversies about why are these guys on spacewalks and I'm watching like air bubbles. You know, it looks like they're in a pool, not space.
NASA has a lot to explain for, honestly.
Also,
how do you have technical difficulties when we can clearly see something coming into the atmosphere, and then all of a sudden you just break the live feed? Oh, no, it's just technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do that on purpose. Dude, we don't believe you.
That'll be an episode coming soon.
Anyway.
Never a straight answer. And then you looked at the slot theory that Laughlin goes into. And it's a very probable theory because of the fact that when you think of our universe or our world, right, and if we were to go absent from our present universe, right, and go through the black hole, we would probably travel to an alternate universe where that Earth has shifted. So we'd be filling their gap, and then another planet would be filling our gap we left from.
I mean, yeah, but not to just float back to Rick and Morty. Sorry, I'm trying to be more creative, but I mean, if you think about it, what if we left behind nothing?
Exactly.
What if our gap is gone? What if
Existence
there was a bunch
gone.
of mergence?
Yeah.
And
or what if we
you could go
collided
so deep.
with matter?
That's what she said.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I also would like to break it down even further. If you really want to dive deep, everything is made of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is made of energy. So in a sense, and energy doesn't die, right? You can't kill energy off, which is why I personally believe in reincarnation. You don't have to, but that's my belief because it only seems logical. So when you bring energy into it, I mean, how does that affect what could have happened? I mean, and also the idea of getting sucked into a black hole, you know it's going to tear you apart. So if it was the black hole theory, you would think it would have to be created right then and there. And just like Max Laughlin talks about, it was a split second. Like, we probably had a 50-50 chance. Mm-hmm. We could have either been completely decimated or we could have wound up here.
Well, and I think it's the car, the bug, and the windshield.
Ooh, how so? Elaborate.
So when you're in the car, you don't necessarily feel the speed. So you slip into that pocket of time-space, mm-hmm. as opposed to being hit by the pocket of time and space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So by being on board the spacecraft,
we were riding it.
Exactly.
Well, no one knows what happens when you get into a black hole.
But that's also because we would be at the point of origin.
Oh, yes, and
as opposed to being flown into the point of origin.
Now, there's a theory that you can get into it if you travel faster than the speed of light. Okay? So if it happens here with these, by the way, these lasers travel the speed of light, is my understanding, on the Hadron Collider. I don't know. I wish I knew more about physics, but at the same time I don't, because this shit would drive me insane. Oh my gosh. Can you
would you sleep at night?
Up all night? Like, you're just like, you can't sleep because you don't know how the universe works. Like, oh, that must have been what it's like to be Einstein.
And it's all theory. Well, that's where you saw some of it with Max, with poor little Max. And, I was giving the interviewer a hard time pre-show because he clearly was not the right person to be interviewing someone of Max's intellect, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right. It's one thing.
Sorry.
I get the point. I get the idea of trying to dumb it down for the audience, simplify it. There's a more polite way for me to put that. To simplify it for the audience. But you don't want a simple person to try to help simplify a complex. What you need is someone who understands the complexity of the topic at hand, who also, is a good public speaker, someone who's able to say, I can simplify this and I can present it. You don't need someone who doesn't understand it to try to constantly ask someone who does these really probing, annoying questions. Like, well, let's say this universe is mirror on the wall and this universe is magic. And poor Max is like, dude, I can't even get to step one with you. You don't understand even the basics of theoretical physics in order to...
Right. And when you look at the way he was explaining it on his drawing, it's almost like guitar strings. And each string has its own frequency that they vibrate at. And that's that frequency of that universe. And then it gets transferred into a neighboring universe or frequency.
That's a very interesting idea. Yeah, that's the frequency theory.
Right, because it's hard to, because when you think infinite, you think forever. Our universe is infinitely expanding. But when you swap, right? When you swap to a neighboring one, you have neighboring infinites, which become finites, because it's the boundaries of those space and time continuums.
But for us, they'd be immeasurable, so they're still infinite.
Infinity isn't necessarily forever. It's just beyond our reasoning. Finite infinity is even more complex because it sounds
like an oxymoron.
So,
yeah, it sounds like a contradiction.
The thing is, there's a beginning and a beginning. Just because it's the end of the universe, as a layman would think, doesn't mean that that's not the beginning. As opposed to the antipole of that could also be the beginning of that universe, depending on how you enter it. The same thing with, whereas if you think of cells and it's that 3D module, if we think of universes as in spheres, right, and realities as in spheres, we're all together, but we're also far apart. Because the sun would be the nucleus of our solar system.
Well,
and then we have a nucleus of our galaxy.
Maybe we're thinking on the wrong shape, though. Have you guys ever heard of sacred geometry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very naturally occurring. That's why it's insanely... It's just insane to go into, to be honest. But there's certain shapes in sacred geometry. Maybe we are more in that.
Mm-hmm.
The golden ratio, right?
Yeah.
You find that
I
all
mean,
over the place.
Shout outs to Coast to Coast AM for my very eclectic knowledge on some of these topics.
But I mean, everything. I've always thought everything in everything, period, is connected. I mean, it astounds me actually when we don't connect things to other things and just treat them like they're a singular item. Like nothing works that way. Nothing works that way. Everything is connected. So I love this topic, by the way. I love that we're on this. And
right.
What if it is sacred geometry, though? It's not lines. What if it's a shape and we're just all connected in that way, like a honeycomb?
Right.
What if we got shifted into a different comb?
Yeah.
Or what if the combs merged into a much larger comb?
And that could explain some of the our differences in memory, right? Because that's kind of what we started out by touching on those topics for. There's, like we said, it's not like Lou and I were in Universe A, and at some point we joined you, Kelsey, in Universe B.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
way more complex than that.
You could have been in Universe Zeta Phi, and then you could have been in Alpha, Beta, and I
with
I
an
don't
infinite
know.
number
I
of
was never
extra
into
denominations, right? Like we could be letters and numbers in here, right?
Exactly.
Because think of, I'm just
Lou
picturing an
from
old
C-137.
right?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking that's how Rick and Morty does it. Man, I'm really bringing it to that. But, actually, now that that's been brought up, they really do approach this subject a lot in Rick and Morty. I wish I could think of other things other than Marvel. Marvel, of course, has approached this a lot.
Well, I think that's relevant, though.
Marvel's been hiding this topic over the head since 1962 in the comics.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
I was curious.
The multiverse was first introduced to the Marvel Comics during the 1960s and 70s in Strange Tales number 103, circa 1962. The character Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four is teleported to an alternate reality for the first time in Marvel history, with the character sent to the fifth dimension, later designated as Earth 1612.
Okay, I like it.
Which is very interesting when you consider how fresh that theory was.
Back
in the
then.
grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
that theory had been invented, it's been credited at around 7 years before that came out. So that was, again, now I won't be the first person to tell you that one Mr. Stan Lee was ahead of his time, but and whoever else, I shouldn't be giving sole credit to Stan there. But again,
Move over, Orson Welles.
Just credit where it's due that they were on top of this. But that you pointed out Kelsey earlier, like, oh, I wish I could think of more examples of this, but I think it's relevant to the fact it's become a more dominant theme in stories recently.
Oh, it certainly has.
So it's not necessarily a knock that it's right in our face right now.
Oh yeah,
well,
which is why you see it in the movies with Doctor Strange having clearly esoteric ties, because that is his source material. There's always been esoteric connections in Marvel comics. It's
there's literally an Illuminati.
There's a Nazi party.
Oh shit!
There's a Nazi party in the Marvel universe.
Can we go beat up Nazis, guys? Can
Not
we make
tonight.
that a family trip?
I have to work tomorrow. And
I did that. I actually I had that last week, so I've got to yeah.
We all know.
I'm full. I'm still full on yesterday's.
I'm not a fan of beating people up. Well, if I have to.
That is something we did not take with us from the previous universe, Lou. That
we
are outgrowing that behavior. No, nothing.
I know.
Nothing.
I know what baby means
Don't do it.
from growing up.
Don't do it.
It means
I don't.
no.
I still didn't hear it.
Rude.
So I love you.
Skipping from that universe back into this one,
right.
Where were we?
Now, I did hear Max Laughlin say something else. He said, because I had something else to say, but I can now remember what it was. But this I do remember I wanted to put out there. Max Laughlin said something along the lines of he feels that some people didn't make it from the merge, basically. And so they would have been, I'm guessing, from what I pulled from him while he was speaking, they would have been already here in the particular timeline that we came into. So if a bunch of different timelines came in, then I'm guessing we would replace the ones that were here. I'm guessing it would all be balanced out. But also, so people that didn't make it and they remember things the way they are, they wouldn't have survived the merge from the other timeline or timelines.
Sister Kelsey, I believe you is talking the rapture.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to bring Jesus into this. I'm actually, that's not my bag.
No, I'm just fucking around.
So I'm going to bring an unintended fourth conspiracy theory into the mix, so I apologize. But it almost seems as if it was fated due to the first conversation that we had as soon as you guys came in for pre-production today. So, if it stands to reason that there are potentially multiple universes converging, and we may or may not have had to replace other versions of ourselves, then I ask you this, Kelsey. Is that frickin' weirdo dude that you said looked like me, is that my doppelganger? And if I touch him, will the universe actually explode? And I'm only calling him a weirdo because I hate when anyone says I look like someone else. It's a person. No, no, it's not.
My God. So what we got to do is, right?
His name was not Kevin.
We have to go find my antithesis, and I have to touch. We have to touch tips.
See, I think that's too simple.
It better not be Nevik.
It was like Matt. It was his name was like Matt.
We gotta find this guy, right? And we need to launch you two into each other.
No, this
not
guy
sexually.
does not deserve this. We're not going to do that.
But I do. No.
Not sexually.
Quit being terrifying.
Oh,
now we need to find a device that hadron collides two humans.
Actually,
I believe they're called cannons.
Yes.
Or catapults.
People have gotten in
or
front.
trebuchets.
Yeah,
There's one man from Russia who got in front of a laser very similar to the Hadron Collider that is at CERN. However, I do believe he was actually in Russia at the time. I could be wrong. Google it. But
Russia will say it never happened.
He had this laser just go through his head. He walked into it. They told him it was off. He had expected it to be off at least. It wasn't shut off in time. He walked in front of it. Didn't tell anybody he did it. Went home and had terrible side effects over the night and had to get a lot of help later on in life. It's really bad to walk in front of one of these particle accelerated lasers. I wouldn't recommend anybody do it. Although it's my understanding that led to a kind of cancer treatment that they have started to where they have dumbed it down basically. I don't mean that in any kind of disrespectful way, by the way, but they have brought the levels down. I'm not sure the proper way to put it. And they are able to, like, target tumors.
Yeah, they essentially take protons
because it's
that can
radiation.
go through your brain tissue without damaging the brain tissue, but they can target the cancerous
Right.
tissues.
It won't. The laser essentially, instead of coming out the other side, it will just stay inside of the area that they're targeting. And because that was a big problem with the guy that walked in front of the laser, it came out the other side. It came out like his nose, basically. And so they brought the levels down so much that they just aim it at the tumor, and it'll just target the tumor, the radiation will. So
Sounds to me like somebody in Russia made that guy a guinea pig.
I hope not. I would hope that it was.
Yes,
a total
comrade,
accident,
it is off.
but
Yes,
Exactly.
of
I don't
course.
trust anything.
You don't
Those
trust
fuckers
me?
used to send dogs into outer space. I don't think they wouldn't.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, we sent monkeys.
Yeah.
You can't throw stones at glass, or glass houses can't throw stones. So, I'm sorry, we're not.
I didn't say we were better.
but we're not. So that's. I mean, we're not attacking you. And never mind. Anyway, so, yes, Max Laughlin made a very good point that, we could have shifted into another universe, and I like all the theories you guys have. Anything else any other theories you guys heard?
Well, there is the simulacra and simulation of it all, which was, I don't know if it's fair to credit this theory, but I'm going to credit this theory to Nick Bostrom, the simulation theory. He is credited with coming up with that in 2003, but I would like to point out that at least one, if not three, Matrix movies had come out by then, which is, in essence, the basis of this theory. The theory is this, that we're living in the Matrix, right? So simulation theory probably even predates the Matrix. I can't even say probably. Plato's Cave, it's a thing. Butterfly Dream, it's a thing. We can look those things up. But that's another one we looked at. Is this a simulation? Again, I don't even hate to do it. Rick and Morty did an episode about it, too. Simulation.
They did. Elon Musk has actually started research. Yes, I
Sorry.
understand he is an iffy topic right now. I will say that I have discontinued my Twitter account because of certain things that have gone on. But the man still does. I will let you know he is the company that is providing the internet access to the Ukrainians during the war right now when they cannot even afford to pay for it. He has continued it, and I do want to say bravo, sir. I think that's wonderful, and so you get props from me on that. But he actually has money going into research to see whether we are in a matrix. He has said he does not believe that we would ever be able to build a simulation of the universe before our species goes extinct, before humanity goes extinct. He doesn't think we'd be able to accomplish it. But he has said there's a 1% chance he believes that we are in a simulation, to the point where he has funding going towards research. So now that man has a lot of money, but still, he is curious enough that he's spending money to try and figure it out. He also bought Twitter, but this is really hard to give him. Okay.
Birds and the bees.
Yeah.
I don't. Where I fall into the simulation theory of what do I believe of it to be plausible is that it wouldn't necessarily be a machine of ones and zeros. It would be the collective conscious aspect, where it's all the collected conscious. So it'd be everybody, the giant, thought, the hive mind ideal.
Which they've done experiments, which I don't have the data handy here, but they have done blind test studies where essentially they show the same information to people in different countries at the same time and don't make anyone aware, and then yet somehow there are these connections, as if to infer that even though test group A was in Australia and test group B was in Austria, pretty far away, somehow Group B was able to learn what Group A had already learned, even though no one was there to teach it to them. But it was just sort of the idea that, well, there are these inherent things that we learn that get shared somehow to our collective unconscious or subconscious, however you want to put it. I am a big proponent of that. I do tend to believe in that. I don't have any scientific basis for that belief, but neither do many people with their beliefs. So suck it, nerds. Yeah, I like that one. I really do.
And there's also the group thought prayer, where you have people in mass praying for a thing, and that thing happens.
Manifestation.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go with it. I believe that when you pray,
yeah.
you are talking to your subconscious, who is also listening to every fucking thought you ever have, and is taking that as an instruction to act upon. So because your subconscious doesn't have that, like it's your autopilot, so it needs to listen to what your conscious mind says and say, oh, that's what I'm going to do. That's why I always preach, like, if you want to make big life changes, you have to tell yourself every fucking day, time and time again, this is what I want to do. You have to wake up, meditate about it. You have to walk around, tell yourself, this is who I'm going to be. You have to visualize it, because your subconscious will take those steps and start moving forward based on what it's told. So that's my thing. I believe that when you're praying, you're asking yourself to manifest something. Again, we can be at odds at that, and that's okay.
No, I think we're much more powerful as a species than we want to believe, or we're ever allowed to believe that we were.
That's the danger.
Because it would be dangerous. And actually, I hope the wrong people don't hear that and take it too seriously, because
it's the strength of a God myth, isn't it?
I actually hope you don't take that too seriously. But
or you drink your own Kool-Aid.
I mean, that's another conspiracy theory we can dive into.
Oh, it's we have and we will.
Flavorful Kool-Aid I've ever had.
Oh, no jokes. Too many kids.
Well.
So,
I want to point out, before we get going into what I think, because at some point we have to address the, for lack of a better term, and I will say that this is an incorrect term, the more logical possibilities, right? What would the naysayers say? But before we do that, I wanted to mention one of the proponents of the black hole theory, because I think it's important. Francesco Calagrio, sorry for my mispronunciation, a nuclear physicist at the University of Rome, and, more notably, the co-winner of the 1995 Nobel Peace Prize, is one of the proponents of the black hole theory, did CERN open a portal, shifting us into a nearby universe? And again, this is something that has been being looked at since the early 90s, so Francesco, way back then, has been looking into this for about 30 years now. It's his day job. He's quite literally, he was this 1A, one of the two best people in the world for at least 1 year at doing these things. Contributions that, I mean, look, I don't have to explain to any of you what the fucking Nobel Prize means, okay? So I just want to say that, like, it's not just dudes like me hanging out, dicking around on their cell phones that have ideas like this. This is someone who is very well versed in this field. So he believes that it could be either the black hole or it's more of like the CERN portal, that we've opened a direct portal. But before I do the boring part and we talk about what could be going on just in between our own two ears, are there any other theories that we haven't addressed yet that we think deserve some shine?
A lot of the theories, I feel, are all connected in certain ways.
Yeah.
I feel like we've touched on everything that I could think of personally. I do want to say, though, that keep in mind that the U.S., right, we did in Bill Clinton's time just say, hey, this is not a good idea. This could be really bad, right? But I do want to make everyone aware that in spite of that, while 70% of the $1 billion per year funding that goes into running the Large Hadron Collider at CERN is funded by Germany, the UK, Italy, France, and Spain. That's about $700 million of that $1 billion. We, here in the U.S., are still supporting it as well. So is India, so is Russia, and also various universities and large organizations. You can take a guess or do some research on what those would be. But don't think that the United States, even though we realize that it's like flipping a coin as to whether or not it's going to go well or go extremely badly, we don't think that it's not being funded by us as well, because the United States is funding this.
And just to be super conspiratorial and to prime us for a future episode, also to give you at home a chance to look through the archives and find the first time that we talked about the Denver airport. We talked about this beforehand. Not only are we contributing directly to the off-site, the European facility, but there happens to be the issue of the Denver airport and all of those sub-basement levels and the millions and millions of dollars it went over budget. And so I will ask, although we can't answer it today, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Is it possible that the mysterious sub-basement of the Denver airport that many of us thought maybe housed aliens or did some weird shit back in the day, is it not? Maybe it's our very own particle collider. So I know that we talked about that before. We're definitely going to look into that basement at some point. Or not that basement, that airport at some point.
If not, I have a feeling it's in California.
I think it's Colorado.
See, that's
hidden in mountains.
We have silos loaded up with nuclear missiles, so it really could be anywhere, couldn't it?
It really could. It really could. And this is an older conspiracy theory, so I'm not going to act like I've come up with anything here, but I do. The idea that like the new capital, the capital of the new United States after, whatever atomic warfare, whatever it is, that Colorado would be an ideal capital for the United States because of all the mountains, because it's, there's a lot of land around it'd be hard to
and
get.
The ecosystem's changing.
Be hard to get in there.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah, climate change is really going to make it so Colorado is probably a bit less cold over the next few years. I just think we just need to accept it at this point. It's just happening. So just accept it and move
maybe
on,
move away from your beachfront property in Florida.
Yeah.
Sell it to Aquaman. He might want it.
I really hope you can move. Yeah. It's,
Namor.
Yeah,
Namor the Submariner. He might want it.
Well, I mean, Namor would never buy it because in his eyes it
already belongs to him. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, I think at this point it's time for me to play downer, right? Because I for one do not trust my brain a lot, and for two, I spend too much of my free time in the criminal psychology realm, watching and just observing lots of true crime content, that being the interrogations, witness interviews, that kind of stuff. And so I have seen it and heard it with my own eyes and ears that sometimes our memories fail us. So we have to address the possibility that we're all just forgetting things or we're remembering it wrong. So I have a couple of facts just to add to the argument. So in 2020, there was a study that found that 76% of adults made at least one detectable error when asked to recall info. Now, I don't have the specifics to what that entails. I don't have the specifics to that. But I do have an anecdotal piece of evidence from just a random shooting where there were, I believe, seven eyewitnesses. And what it came down to was multiple eyewitnesses reported that the van was a different color. So we had multiple people report the shooter was in a red van. We also had multiple people report it was a teal van. It was so there have been instances that you can go to, that you can find, where it's like, hey, we can prove that all of you were here, and we believe that none of you have any reason to lie to us, but yet we can't get you all to agree on one story. So what is it? What happened?
Playing devil's advocate, was the van red and teal?
It was not a PT Cruiser. No, that's a good question. It's a valid question.
Was it a wood grain station wagon?
Funny thing, it was a truck. It wasn't even a van. No, just
Probably.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Right?
You know, I did the law enforcement criminal justice classes, and it's not uncommon to have multiple witnesses completely misremember some shit. Because when you boil it down, each person, each one of us, we're the lead character in our own video game. And we pay attention to what we pay attention when we need to fucking pay attention.
And
to
our
it.
brain will colorfully fill in the gaps as needed.
Everything
And everyone's brain is different. Some people's are more hyper-focused. Other people's are more hyper-vigilant, self-aware.
That's a great
Others
point.
are ADHD like myself, and we can't focus on anything. So I couldn't tell
yeah.
you if he was driving something.
To combine
What
the two,
shirt am I wearing?
Yellow.
Then to combine the two, it
my
could,
back.
it could be kind of a mix of like, because as they talk about, it could be, and there's also there's the ego protection of it, or the cognitive dissonance. We all tend to trust our own memories over someone else's. But then there's also the idea of, to be conversely, there's the idea of influence. So if you haven't thought about something in a long time, and I come to you and I say, oh, you remember when Taco Bell had the so-and-so? Oh, yeah. Might not have ever been a thing.
Right.
I could have made that up, but you remembered something adjacent, so I could make up. I say, hey, you remember when Taco Bell had the grilled chicken Caesar salad, grilled stuffed burrito, and you're thinking of something that you really liked from Taco Bell from 15 years ago that had chicken in it and a sauce?
Or a Wendy's wrap.
Yeah.
Or a Wendy's wrap, or a McDonald's snack wrap, and you're like, oh, fuck yeah, dude, that was the best. I remember that.
Yep.
And now it is cemented in your brain that
As a
that's the way
memory.
that it happened. And you're not going to believe someone else who came to tell you because your brain's not going to remember
I fucking
that
worked at Taco Bell. That never happened there.
that asshole Kevin just spun a yarn for me a couple days ago. No, your brain is going to remember that. It's not going to remember the source. It's going to be like, nope, I had to correct this information. It's been corrected now. And boom, I'm going to regurgitate it. I, as somebody who researches and then talks a lot, I can tell you the number of times I have accidentally just blurted out someone else's words. It can happen if you're not vigilant. It can happen to you.
It's called being a parent.
And self-aware.
It's self-aware. In that, just to go back to something we talked about earlier, which was kind of on point here with the Caitlin Emote, the neuroscientist who said that neurons that fire together wire together. We used founding fathers as an example, but it's just, I think that is something that needs to be explored because it is so. The founding fathers thing was a great example because you're in history class, right? You could have learned. I mean, I'm just thinking about it like a middle school or a history class. How many different, especially the way that it's taught to us, where it's just random date, random tidbit. These dudes beat this dude on this day. How many random pieces of information did we digest and remember in one 45-minute stretch? That could have very easily, we've gotten some wires crossed, and then no point in challenging that information for the last 20 years because who really cares about it?
Well, and you also have to think of how much the teaching model changed when we were children and how much it became very much we were taught to attest. We were taught to test well, not to remember things 20 or 30 years from then.
Thank you, George W. Bush.
So
For so many things.
oh yeah, you know,
Sarcasm.
yeah, our generation's Vietnam and all our peers that came back addicted to heroin.
And
That we were
No
there
Child
to
Left
protect.
Behind Act,
Yeah.
that definitely left us with no real skills in life. Thank you. We
But
appreciate
hey,
it.
at least
It's not like our
all that
parents taught us.
heroin got
They
produced.
didn't have time
Yeah.
because you invoke too much capitalism. Oh, this is going on a crazy journey. Never mind. I'm sorry. Please continue.
But we were taught to attest. We were taught to regurgitate what we were told on fucking command like we were Pavlov's puppies.
And history
Agreed.
changed over the years.
Exactly.
I have no doubt. I can't even imagine what's in the history books today. That's not as it was when we were kids in our history books.
I can only
talking about the same subjects, by the way. I realize that history moves forward and everything like that. So I get that, but yeah, history has changed, I think, in our history books themselves.
Which is another good point. And just to throw in an anecdote and also teach you some things that we may look into at another date, and we definitely have looked into in the past. For instance, in middle school, I was taught about how the United States entered World War I.
Yeah.
If the kids of today are being taught a little bit more about the truth, they should be getting taught a different version of that story than I was taught. Now, I don't know that that's actually the case, because a lot of what we do in the American school system is teach our children about how nasty propaganda is while we force feed propaganda down their throat for 45 minutes a day.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But, so we think of things like, and this may be Vietnam as well. Was it the USS Maine? Basically, so you won't be happy if you begin to investigate the U.S.'s entrance into any major conflict, if I'm being honest with you. We were
double dealt in World War II.
Yeah, we never dealt in World War II. We double dealt in World War I. It's a good chance. Vietnam, we sunk our own ship to get there. We have been doing bad things for a very long time, and so depending on, and these things were all taught to me willingly by a college professor who, doesn't have to abide by the same rules. He was also a former Air Force pilot. I will never say his name, but he showed me photos of countries that he was not allowed to even take. So he was a guy that I trusted immensely. But again, it just say, so how many people think they have a false memory but they were just taught a bullshit narrative? Like, look back at just U.S. history over the time and think of the version that we've been told versus the version that gets taught by the rest of the world. And then there's so much cognitive dissonance right there alone. So
How long
America, good guy.
Every
How long
time.
did it take for us to learn about Juneteenth?
Some people still
Right there,
don't even know.
If you don't know what Juneteenth is, please Google it.
I tried to tell someone one time that You Dropped a Bomb on Me by the Gap, not the Gap Band, but anyway, the song You Dropped a Bomb on Me had, I was making a point about the Tulsa race riots and, like, the fact that there were actually, like, people fucking got bombed, and they were just like, what are you talking about? No, and it wasn't, thank God for The Watchmen, an HBO series. That was a sequel, that it just made up a bunch of new content. Like, you can have your issues with the source material, but like, hey, they actually brought that to the forefront. Like, hey, this fucking happened, dude. Like, this is a real thing that happened.
It also happened in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. They bombed a predominantly black neighborhood because they were afraid of Black Panthers, I think.
Yeah,
it was something like that.
And then let's even talk about assassinations. It is a proven fact that Martin Luther King was killed by the FBI. Okay, I'm sorry. It's been proven in civil court. They were found. They had to pay money to his family. All right, so
if you look at the files they had on him, and then you look at when it happened and how he said, I'm not telling you to just get murdered. Exercise your Second Amendment, and that's when he gets murdered.
And also, it should be worth pointing out that this man was not perfect. He was being blackmailed by the FBI because he was stepping out on his wife. All right, that's a thing that happened. It happened a decent amount of times.
It
doesn't change anything that he was doing.
Right.
Correct.
It's still shitty.
Also, yes, but it goes to prove like they were on him. They were on him, and he was an issue for them. And to add to what Lou stated, the other thing that Martin Luther King did that suddenly made him persona non grata was he started to make it a class issue. He at that point had come to understand that while racism absolutely is an issue in this country, and it was even more so back then, that classism is the root of this issue, that it is always a rich versus the poor. Skin color is secondary, and in fact, that racism is just a way to keep the poor people fighting amongst themselves.
We've been let our capitalism get way out of hand.
Yes.
Folks.
Oh yeah, poor is the new black.
It's gotten.
God damn it.
We at some point we should talk about the conspiracy theory of the rent hike. I mean, how that's been going on, and landlords are knowingly raising rent and making sure people wind up on the streets. Like, why is that allowed to happen?
Yeah.
I can totally see that being a thing with Martin Luther King, because it is a huge issue. But if you have top dogs that want to keep making a lot of money, they're not going to let that stand. And those top dogs have their fingers in politician pies.
Especially when they see someone who has his finger on the pulse and actually is able to steer up the people and get them to believe. Apples to oranges, but it's a similar reason that JFK was taken out by his own government. But
yep, murders make change, though. Unfortunately, that's a sacrifice is sometimes necessary. Not saying anyone should go out and sacrifice themselves.
No,
please don't just go spur of the moment. But it seems to be a trend, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on some things that we definitely will talk about. I think that's the most important thing for us, is that we're back. Right.
The grand resurgence.
It is the Renaissance, baby.
And I tagged along.
It's back and better than ever. And I do hope to get some familiar faces back into the rotation occasionally. There will be some that, unfortunately, you probably will never hear from again. But that's all right. That's part of life.
It's part of change. It's part of growth.
It's part of alternate universes.
Yeah. Only thing that stays the same is everything changes.
They were the ones left behind.
With Kirk Cameron.
Oh, the rapture. So, with that, you can find us on the internet at Bad. It's been so long since I've said that. You can find us on the internet at Bad Dinner Guests, and we will be back with more. I don't even know what the next episode's about yet, so you're going to have to subscribe if you want to know what it is, and maybe follow us on social media.
Maybe we'll talk Bigfoot. Maybe we'll talk.
Maybe we'll talk the oil squids. The oil.
Oh
squids.
my God! Can we talk about the real life Cloverfield monster? Is that what we're talking about? The sludge squid? Yeah.
The squids they found in the oil tankers back in the 90s.
My Cloverfield homies know what I'm talking about, and maybe I know where that story came from now. But
Montauk.
Yeah.
A little Montauk in my life. A little conspiracy to drive the vibe.
We love those conspiracies. Don't trust anything.